He kept the rifle low, barrel tilted toward the dirt, finger straight, jaw tight. "You don't work here." The woman kept sweeping. The broom scraped slow and steady, pushing dust off the packed ground like it had somewhere else to go. He took one step closer. "You lost?" She didn't look up. No, the answer landed flat, like it had been waiting. He said, "This is private land." She nodded once. "I know." He tightened his grip. "Then why are you sweeping it?" She paused, pressed the broom down, and said, "Because it's dirty." The rancher watched the ground behind her. It looked cleaner. Not neat. Just lighter, like something had been lifted. Wind cut through the yard, cold enough to sting, but her hands were bare. No gloves. No shake. He said, "Where'd you come from?" She dragged the broom again. "From here." He scoffed. "Nobody comes from here." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were calm, steady, not curious. "Some of us do." He shifted his boots in the dirt. "What's your name?" She said, "You already know it." His stomach tightened. "I don't." She tilted her head. "You do." He waited for a smile. None came. He said, "I don't remember you." She answered, "That's not the same thing." The broom kept moving. Sweep. Pause. Sweep. Like time measured in strokes. He glanced toward the house, then back at her. "You got a bag?" She shook her head. "You got somewhere to be?" "I'm where I'm needed." He laughed once, sharp. "You're needed to clean my dirt?" She said, "It's not yours." His face hardened. "Everything inside this fence is mine." She tapped the broom on the ground. "For now." The wind picked up. Fence wire sang low. He raised his voice. "You can't be here." She said, "I can." He said, "I'll call the sheriff." She met his stare. "You could." He hesitated. The word sheriff sat heavy between them. He said, "You trespassing." She replied, "You're watching." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" She swept a little faster. "It means you haven't stopped me." He noticed her shoes. Old. Worn thin. Dry, even with the clouds rolling in. He said, "Storm's coming." She nodded. "I know." He said, "You should go." She asked, "Where?" He didn't answer. The broom scraped again, softer now, almost careful. He said, "How do you know my name?" She said it then, quiet and exact. His name. The way his mother used to say it when she was tired. He felt the rifle dip without meaning to. "Don't say that," he said. She answered, "I didn't come to hurt you." He swallowed. "Then why are you here?" She stopped sweeping. The yard felt louder without the sound. "I've been waiting," she said. "For what?" "For you to see me." He shook his head. "I see a stranger." She said, "You see what you left." His chest tightened. He said, "I didn't leave anything." She stepped forward, just one step, close enough he could smell soap and dust. "You left silence." He wiped his palm on his jeans and said, "You got no fear." She shrugged. "Fear comes after truth." He stared at her broom. "You think you're fixing something." She replied, "I'm clearing it." He said, "Same thing." She shook her head. No, he felt that answer settle in his ribs. The clouds pressed lower. A bird lifted from the fence and vanished. He said, "You don't belong." She said, "Neither do ghosts." Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to rattle the porch boards and shake the windows. The rancher flinched and looked up at the darkening sky. When he looked back, she was already sweeping again, calm as before, the dirt moving away from her feet as the storm rolled in. The air tasted like metal and waiting. Rain hit hard before he could close the door all the way. The wind bent the fence posts like they were made of paper. He stepped inside, shaking the water off his coat, eyes on her. "You can stay," he said, voice tight. "Until the storm passes." "Not longer." She nodded once, too easily. "I won't be a bother." He didn't answer. He walked past her toward the kitchen, boots squelching on the wet floor. The rain hammered the roof like a drum. Silence stretched in the spaces between each drop. He set down his coat and shook his head. "You hungry?" She didn't move. "No, you sure?" She finally looked up. "I don't eat much." The words landed flat in the small house. He pulled out a chair from the table, rubbed the back of his neck. The house smelled like old wood and dust in rain. She noticed things he hadn't: an extra chair that never got used, a woman's coat still hanging by the door, letters stacked by the stove, edges yellowed and curling. He bristled when her eyes flicked over the papers, over the marks of a life left half-finished. Lightning flickered outside, and the lights inside winked off for a second, leaving shadows that made her stillness sharper, more present. She tilted her head. "Who owned this land before you?" He didn't answer. "Answer me," she said softly. He shook his head again, silence pressing like the storm outside. Rain slapped the windows harder. Wind forced its way through a crack, rattling the boards. She moved a few steps closer to the window, hands folded, watching the blur of water and dark trees beyond. "Did anyone live here before you?" He said nothing. She sighed, the sound almost like wind itself. He tried to ignore her, tried to check the windows and doors, but the way she watched him, quiet and patient, made the room feel smaller. A flash of lightning lit the kitchen. The shadows behind her stretched long and thin across the wall. He noticed a crack in the back door, the one he swore was locked. His stomach tightened. The wind pressed harder. Boards rattled. The door handle twisted with the gust, squealed against the frame, and then the door burst open. Rain poured in, soaking the floor, splattering his boots. He grabbed the edge of the table, steadying himself. She stayed in place, almost untouched, calm as if the storm respected her. "See," she said, not accusing, just matter-of-fact. "It wants in." He lunged to close the door, hands wet and slippery. He braced it against the wall. "Damn it," he muttered, teeth clenched. The wind slammed it again. She watched him, broom still upright, like she'd been here before, like she'd known this exact moment was coming. He cursed under his breath and finally wedged a chair against the door handle. Rain slashed across the windows, drowning out all sound except the storm itself. Inside, the room smelled of wet wood, old dust, and tension. He stood back, chest heaving, eyes flicking between her and the shuddering door. "You're not leaving when it's like this," he said, more statement than question. She said, "I'm staying until it passes." That's all. Lightning struck again, closer, and for a moment, the room seemed smaller, darker. The sound of the storm, the old tune, the weight of the well, all of it pressed on him at once. He wanted to look away, to push her out, to claim the empty space around him, but he couldn't. "It's still down there," she whispered, voice soft but cutting through the storm. He turned fully toward her, meeting her gaze, feeling the cold press of fear, guilt, and memory all tangled together. She stood near the window, shadows long and lean, broom in hand, as though she had been waiting for him to notice, to understand, to feel the truth he had tried so hard to ignore. He leaned against the doorframe, rain dripping off his coat, chest tight, eyes flicking between her and the blurred yard outside. "You don't know that," he said, voice rough, strained. She stood a few feet away, calm, broom still upright, eyes steady. "I know who screamed," she said, quiet but certain. He turned sharply. "Stop." Her shoulders didn't move. "You stopped first," she said. His fists clenched. The room seemed smaller, tighter, walls pressing in with memory and storm. He took a step toward her. "You're lying." She shook her head slowly, almost pitying. "I'm not. I watched from the edge. Heard everything." He shook his head again, backing up toward the kitchen table. "You shouldn't know that." Nobody should. She didn't move, didn't waver. Some truths wait too long, she said. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating her for a split second, pale, calm, immovable. He felt a chill even through his coat, even through the roar of the storm. "You're talking about her," he said finally, voice tight. "The one they blamed." She nodded. "Yes." He gritted his teeth. "They were wrong." She stepped closer. "Did you stop it?" Her question hung in the air. He looked away, jaw tight. "I tried," he muttered. "Tried," she echoed. "You didn't do enough." He swallowed hard, fists opening and closing at his sides. The wind slammed the door again, rattling the frame, shaking the house with a force that felt like accusation. "You don't understand," he said, almost pleading. "I was just a boy." She tilted her head. "Then you know how it feels to watch. And do nothing." He blinked, swallowed, trying to steady his voice. "I didn't know what to do." She said softly, "You could have done more." "Still can." The broom scraped lightly across the floor as she shifted, deliberate, calm, leaving traces where she passed. The rhythm matched the storm outside, the pulse of something he had buried long ago. "You're saying I failed," he said, voice low. "Yes," she said simply. "But you can fix it now." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Fix it? How?" She stepped even closer, almost close enough that he could feel the cold of her presence, the certainty in her eyes. "By letting them see. By letting the truth in." He shook his head. "The sheriff, the neighbors, they'll never believe." She raised a brow. "They don't have to." "You do." The room fell silent except for the rain hammering the roof and the low whistle of the wind through broken boards. He moved toward the window, trying to ignore her, trying to focus on the storm, on anything but the weight of her words. "It's just a story now," he muttered. She leaned against the wall, calm as ever. "Stories don't stay buried forever." Her gaze followed the darkened yard, the old well filled in long ago, the place where memory and silence had been pressed down like dirt. "You think you buried it," she said, "but it waits. And it remembers." He ran a hand through his hair, chest tight. "I can't," she interrupted, voice firm, unwavering. "You can. You have to." The broom scraped the floor again, a small, deliberate noise that made the silence louder. He swallowed. "Why me?" She met his eyes. "Because you're the one who stayed. Because you know." The words hit him harder than the storm. He could hear the wind screaming through the cracks, see the rain smearing the yard, smell wet earth and old wood in fear. He felt small, exposed, as if the house itself were leaning in to watch, waiting for his answer. Lightning struck, briefly illuminating the room, the shadows stretching long and sharp across the walls. She stepped toward the center, calm, unwavering. "Will you let them come back here?" Her voice was soft, deliberate, a question that carried weight far beyond the room. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words stuck in his throat, heavy, unwanted. The storm pressed closer. His chest tightened. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until her calm filled the space entirely. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't waver. The broom rested lightly against the floor. He swallowed again, heart hammering, eyes flicking to the window, the shadows, the storm outside, the weight of what she had said. His hands twitched at his sides. He started, voice low. She waited. "I don't know if I can." She tilted her head slightly, patience absolute. "Then start," she said. And the wind screamed through the cracks again, rattling boards, shaking the house, as if echoing her command. The knock came sharp and sudden, cutting through the roar of the storm like a blade. The rancher froze, heart hammering, hand brushing the rifle in the corner. He hadn't expected anyone, least of all now. Lightning flashed, and through the blur of rain, he saw the sheriff's silhouette, badge glinting in the flash. "You alone?" the man called, voice carrying authority he hadn't heard in years. "No," the rancher said, voice tight. "You sure?" the sheriff pressed. I said no, he repeated, swallowing the rise of panic in his chest. The woman didn't move. She stayed 3 feet back, invisible to the man at the door. She held the broom upright, calm, like she owned the silence, the shadows, the storm. The rancher's gaze flicked to her, uncertainty mingling with the old dread of the sheriff's presence. You expecting me? The sheriff asked, stepping closer, rain soaking his coat, boots heavy on the porch. Not exactly, the rancher muttered, keeping the door wedged with one hand. Thought the taxes were paid? The sheriff asked, voice leveling into that old familiarity of favors owed, promises whispered in backrooms. The rancher's jaw tightened. Paid, he said. The sheriff's eyes scanned the yard, the house, the storm-lashed porch. Figures. Someone else should be handling your affairs while you're out here alone. The rancher's lips pressed into a thin line. I handle what I handle, he said, voice low. The sheriff laughed, brief, sharp, then stopped when a gust slammed the door again, rattling the frame. The wind cut through the room, cold and wet, but the woman remained calm, watching. Her lips moved, barely a whisper, and the rancher felt her instructions ripple through him, guiding the words he repeated aloud, shaping the defense he had to give. You don't look like you've been alone, the sheriff said, stepping inside before invitation, boots heavy on the wet floor. I've got company, the rancher said, voice steady though his pulse jumped. Company, huh? The sheriff's eyes flicked across the room, catching nothing but shadows. The woman stayed near the wall, broom in hand, body rigid and poised, her presence unacknowledged by anyone but him. He could feel the heat of her patience pressing in, making the air tight and heavy. The sheriff moved deeper into the kitchen, scanning the furniture, the walls, the faint traces of another presence he couldn't see. I see nothing unusual, he said, voice louder, forcing authority. The rancher's chest tightened. Then you're blind, he muttered under his breath. She leaned slightly, just enough for him to catch the movement, and he followed, repeating the sentence louder. The sheriff blinked, unease creeping in. What did you say? You're blind, he said again. The woman's eyes met his for the briefest second, and he felt the weight of her calm, silent, unyielding, all-knowing. Lightning cracked, filling the room with stark white. Rain pounded the roof harder. The sheriff's badge caught the light, gleaming sharp and accusing. Don't play games with me, the man said, hand resting near his belt. I'm not, the rancher said, chest tight, words clipped, careful. She whispered once, low, wait. He felt the timing, the rhythm of her instruction, and let it guide him. The sheriff shifted uneasily, boots scraping against wet floorboards. Who's that? The sheriff asked finally, voice sharper, pointing toward where she stood, unseen. The rancher's pulse jumped. He swallowed and said, nobody. Lightning flared, illuminating her faint outline, just enough that her calm presence became impossible to ignore. The sheriff blinked, frowned, shook his head. You're hiding someone. The rancher shook his head, repeating under his breath what she had told him. She never spoke, only guided him in silence, letting the truth slip through carefully. The storm pressed against the walls, wind shrieking through cracks, rain hammering the roof like judgment. He stepped toward the sheriff, keeping the woman between them but hidden from view. I said no one, he repeated, voice low, steady, controlled. The sheriff's eyes narrowed, doubt creeping in, authority slipping. Mind if I look around? The man said, voice tight. The rancher's jaw clenched. She whispered again, a single instruction, and he blocked the sheriff's movement, words firm, clipped. The door rattled behind them. Boards groaned. Rain poured in. The sheriff stepped fully inside, uninvited, boots heavy on the floor, authority pressing down like a weight. The woman remained calm, patient, invisible except to him. He felt the tension coil, sharp and cold. We're done here, the sheriff said, voice low now, almost uncertain. The rancher didn't answer. She stayed, silent and unwavering, letting the storm outside and the man's unease fill the room, holding him steady for what was coming next. The lights went out before he could reach the stove, plunging the kitchen into darkness broken only by the storm's flashes. He froze, hands outstretched, feeling the cold of the wet floor beneath him. The woman was behind the sheriff, invisible to him, standing calm and still, her presence heavier than the storm. You remember her? The sheriff asked suddenly, voice cutting through the darkness, tight with suspicion. Who? The rancher replied, chest tightening, trying to place the tone, the weight. The one you buried. A laugh came from the sheriff, low, forced, fading quickly as he realized the room wasn't empty, even if he couldn't see her. The rancher swallowed, hands twitching, voice low. I don't know what you mean. The woman didn't move. Her silence pressed into him, guiding the words he repeated under her gaze. I don't know what you mean, he said, carefully, testing the authority in the room against the calm and the shadows. The sheriff frowned, taking a step closer, boots scraping wet floorboards, the storm outside rattling the walls. You're hiding something, the sheriff said, voice rising, hands brushing his coat, fingers brushing the edge of his badge. The rancher shook his head. No. I'm not hiding anything. He could feel her presence like heat against his back, patient and deliberate. The darkness seemed to thicken, walls pressing in with memory, with silence, with the things he thought he had buried and never touched again. The storm screamed outside, rain slamming the roof, wind twisting through cracks, but she remained unmoved. Lightning flashed briefly, illuminating her pale, still figure for a heartbeat. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The sheriff's face twisted, eyes narrowing. You've changed, the man said, voice sharp, searching for weakness. I've survived, the rancher said, tone clipped, careful. Her eyes met his briefly, urging steadiness. He could feel the instruction in her calm, her certainty, guiding him through the tension, making the words find their place even as the storm tried to tear the room apart. The wind rattled the door again. The house groaned. He could hear the rain hammering the roof, pounding the walls, dripping into corners, each drop a reminder of the storm's power and the weight of what he'd kept hidden. You think you can hide this? The sheriff demanded, voice louder, stepping forward. I don't hide, the rancher said. Her lips moved faintly, silent instructions, and he echoed them, repeating words carefully, I don't hide. I face it. The sheriff blinked, confusion breaking through his bluster. He felt the tension coil tight in his chest, pressing like the storm outside, threatening to crush him. You're not alone, she whispered, almost inaudible, guiding his heartbeat, anchoring him. The rancher repeated softly, I'm not alone. The sheriff froze, a shiver of unease running through him. Something was wrong, something he couldn't name. He reached for the door handle, but the woman's presence kept him in place, pressing into the space around him. Breathing became the only sound, deep, measured, heavy. He could hear the storm, feel it in the walls, in the floor, in the silence that stretched between each pulse. The sheriff's hand hovered near his belt, uncertain, authority slipping. He felt her eyes on him, felt the calm guidance that made him steady, repeating her words, carrying them into the darkness, I am not alone. I will not hide. I face it. A crack of lightning split the room in two, and for a heartbeat, shadows danced across walls, ceiling, and floor. She remained still, patient, unmoving. The storm pressed harder, wind shrieking, rain hammering, floorboards groaning. The sheriff's uncertainty grew, the authority in his voice weakening. Breathing was the only proof that the house still held human presence, but she was the anchor, invisible and patient, shaping the tension with quiet insistence. The rancher moved slowly, deliberately, guided by her silent instruction, repeating words into the dark, steadying himself against the storm, against the sheriff, against the memory of what had been buried and forgotten. Each breath, each word, each careful step made the storm's chaos feel manageable, contained, pressed into the corners. The darkness swallowed sound except for the rhythm of their breathing and the unyielding presence of the woman. A faint match struck somewhere near the stove, small flame flickering against the shadows. The light revealed her briefly, unmoving, calm, and he exhaled, steadying himself. The storm continued outside, wind shrieking, rain hammering. Darkness pressed in, but her presence held him, gave him strength. The sheriff stepped back slightly, unease written across his face, uncertainty creeping into his authority. She was patient, deliberate, unmoving, and the rancher repeated her words one last time into the dark, I am not alone. I will not hide. I face it. The match flared briefly, casting the kitchen in harsh, flickering light. Shadows leapt across walls and ceiling, sharp and jagged, revealing her standing in the center of the room, broom upright, calm and deliberate. The sheriff blinked, stepping back, boots scraping the wet floorboards, eyes wide. "That's not," he started, voice cracking, authority slipping. She didn't flinch. "Say her name," she said, voice low but commanding. The words landed heavier than the storm outside. The rancher swallowed, chest tight, lips dry. "I don't have to," he began, but her gaze cut through him, unwavering, patient and absolute. "Say it," she repeated. The storm outside roared louder, wind thrashing the walls, rain pounding, lightning cracking like judgment. He took a shaky breath. "Margaret," he whispered, barely audible, the name scraping out of him like something buried and splintered. She nodded slightly. "Now tell them what happened." The sheriff's face went pale. "Wait, what are you talking about?" he demanded, stepping closer, hands shaking, unsure of the room, unsure of the truth he had long ignored. The rancher's voice rose, steadier now, clipped, careful. "You know what happened. You know what was buried. You blamed her. You let them blame her." The sheriff took a step back, trying to mask his fear, but the shadows, the flickering light, the woman's presence, pressed into him, relentless. She moved slightly, broom sweeping the floor in a single deliberate arc, calm and controlled. Each movement seemed to draw the truth out of the air, pressing it into the room, into the walls, into the ears of the man who had thought himself untouchable. "Say it," she whispered again, patient, unyielding. The rancher repeated, louder this time, "You blamed her. You let them blame her. Margaret didn't do it. It wasn't her." The sheriff's hands twitched, fingers brushing the badge he clutched, authority failing, unsteady in the face of the storm, in the face of history laid bare. Lightning flashed again, harsh and white, illuminating the room fully for a heartbeat. She stood still, shadows stretching long across the walls, calm as if the storm itself had nothing to do with her. The rancher felt the weight of her gaze, felt the certainty of her presence push through him, steadying, guiding, shaping his words. He said, "You hid what they did. You buried it, left it for someone else to suffer." The sheriff swallowed, mouth opening, closing, unable to find defense. The wind shrieked through cracks in the house, rattling boards, echoing the tension in the room. "Enough," the sheriff barked, voice cracking, but the authority was gone. The broom scraped the floor again, deliberate, steady, a rhythm that filled the silence left by fear and storm. She spoke then, softly but sharp, "Truth doesn't hide. Not forever." The rancher repeated, voice firm now, "Truth doesn't hide. Not forever." The words rang in the room, over the storm, over the thunder, over the years of silence and buried grief. The sheriff backed toward the door, boots slipping slightly on the wet floor, uncertainty in every step. He glanced at the woman, tried to deny her presence, but the flicker of light revealed her too clearly, unmoving, patient, unyielding. I can't," he stammered, voice tight. She didn't answer, didn't move. Her calm filled the room. The rancher said again, louder, firmer, "You can't deny what you know. You can't hide it anymore." The storm outside intensified, wind tearing at the house, rain slamming the windows, floorboards groaning, but inside, the room felt even heavier, pressed by history and truth. The sheriff turned, shoulders tight, and ran, boots pounding the porch, slamming through the wet yard, swallowed by the rain. The rancher remained, chest tight, hands trembling slightly, broom resting lightly against the floor, presence of the woman grounding him, steadying him, patient. She finally moved, a small sweep of the broom across the floor, calm, deliberate. He exhaled, shaky, chest rising and falling, the storm outside no longer the loudest force in the house. He could hear her humming softly now, the old tune slipping into the room, slow, measured, weaving around the echoes of confession and fear. Lightning lit the walls briefly, revealing them together, him, grounded, and her, calm and absolute. The rain continued, relentless, but the room no longer felt powerless. He stood, hands gripping the broom lightly now, words still echoing in the space. She whispered, almost to herself, "It is done." The rancher nodded, voice low. "It is done." And for the first time in years, he felt the weight lift slightly, the storm pressing on the house outside, but inside, truth burned steady and unmoving, stronger than thunder, stronger than fear. The storm didn't let up, but inside, the house felt different. The sheriff's footsteps had vanished, swallowed by the rain, leaving only the sound of water hammering the roof and her broom scraping the floor. She moved slowly, deliberately, sweeping over the same lines as before, dust and ash rising in faint spirals. The rancher watched her, hands resting on the table, heart still hammering from the confession and the sheriff's flight. Her presence filled the room, calm and absolute, and the storm outside suddenly felt secondary, almost distant. "You stayed," she said softly, never looking up. The rancher shifted, unsure what to say. "I should have spoken sooner," he admitted, voice low. She finally looked at him, pale face calm in the flickering light. "You're speaking now," she said. The words were simple, but they carried weight, settling into the corners of the room where fear and silence had lived for years. He nodded once, slowly. "I am." Her broom traced another line across the floor. Dust and ash swirled and vanished. "Why?" he asked, voice cracking slightly, leaning against the table. "Why do you do this? Sweep it up and leave?" She paused, calm, unwavering. "Because someone finally listens," she said. "Someone finally sees." He swallowed hard, chest tight. "I see. I hear." She nodded once, not smiling, not approving, just acknowledging the effort, the first steps of acknowledgement. The wind pressed against the walls, rattling boards, but inside, the rhythm of her sweeping was louder, steadier, sharper than the storm outside. He moved closer, feeling the weight of years pressing down, the storm's fury fading against the gravity of her calm. "You don't need to speak," he asked. "I don't," she replied. Her voice carried clarity, conviction. "The work speaks." He watched the broom sweep again, lines appearing and disappearing, dirt turning to ash, memories dissolving under her hands. The rain hammered the windows, relentless, but the room felt warmer, safer. He shifted a chair closer to her, sat silently, watching. She didn't pause, didn't acknowledge him, but he felt her presence like a tether, steadying, guiding. "I thought justice was loud," he said finally, voice low. "It is thorough," she replied. "It's careful. It waits. And it comes when the time is right." He exhaled slowly, the sound mixing with the storm. She swept along the edges of the room now, dust disappearing under her steady hands. "What happens to all the things buried?" he asked quietly. She glanced at him briefly, eyes calm, unwavering. "They don't stay buried forever," she said. "Some are ashes. Some are remembered. Some are carried by those who finally listen." The words pressed into him, heavy, grounding, like the storm pressing against the walls. He watched her move to the corner of the room, broom tracing deliberate arcs. The floor seemed lighter, cleaner, but not empty. The air felt different, charged, full of memory released, truth revealed, silence broken. "I stayed," he said softly again. "I stayed because I had to," she replied. Her gaze didn't leave the floor, didn't seek approval. The work mattered more than acknowledgement, more than thanks. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the room briefly. Dust swirled in the streak of light, ash caught in the air, fading before it could settle. She swept along another line, deliberate and exact. He could feel the weight of her patience pressing into him, steadying, shaping the space, making the silence inside stronger than the storm outside. He exhaled, finally letting tension leave his shoulders. The broom scraped again, a simple, steady rhythm, a heartbeat in the room. He knew now that she came not for anger, not for noise, but for the quiet, for the work, for the thoroughness of truth being laid bare. The storm would pass, eventually. The work, however, would remain. Dawnlight pressed faintly against the storm clouds outside, pale and soft. It seeped through the cracks in the walls, brushing across the floor she had swept. He watched the light settle over the ash and dust, over the lines she had traced and erased. The room felt lighter, steadier, even though the storm still raged outside. Her broom rested briefly on the floor, calm, deliberate. "You see it?" she asked quietly, not looking up. "Yes," he replied. The storm continued, but the room had changed. Dirt turned to ash. Memories lifted. Silence had a weight, but it was steadied now. She swept again, slow, deliberate, thorough, and for the first time in a long while, he could feel that something lasting had begun. The storm moved on, fading into distant rumbles and the steady drip of water from the eaves. The rancher stood by the window, watching the yard wash clean under the pale light of early morning. Silence filled the house, heavy, lingering, carrying the weight of the storm and the confessions it had uncovered. She swept along the floor slowly, deliberately, turning ash and dust into faint lines that faded beneath her hands. He stayed still, feeling the emptiness where fear and uncertainty had lived, replaced by something fragile, deliberate, real. "I'm leaving," she said softly, not looking up. Her broom traced a careful arc, lines forming and disappearing, carrying the remnants of memory into nothing. The rancher's chest tightened. "Will you stay?" His voice was low, uncertain. She paused briefly, broom upright, shadow stretching behind her in the morning light. "I don't stay," she said simply. The words landed heavier than the storm had. He swallowed. "Then what happens to me?" She didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, it was calm, deliberate, unavoidable. "You remember." He felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. Memory, duty, the burden of the past all pressed into him with quiet authority. The storm had passed, but the remnants of it lingered not just in the soaked ground outside, but in the air, in the walls, in the echoes of names spoken and truths revealed. He watched her move toward the filled-in well, each step measured, deliberate, like she was walking across both the yard and his memory at the same time. "Do I?" he asked, voice low, fragile. She glanced at him over her shoulder, calm, unwavering. "You will," she said. The weight of the words pressed into the room, into the silence, into the faint light spreading across the floor. He could feel the pull of the well, the place that had held secrets and fear for years. The earth around it seemed undisturbed, yet he knew it carried the echoes of what had been buried, what had been blamed on the innocent, what had waited for acknowledgement. She knelt briefly by the loose dirt at the well's edge, broom resting against her shoulder. Her fingers traced the soil lightly, careful, reverent. "It waits," she said softly, not looking at him. "But not forever." He stepped closer, boots pressing into the damp ground, heart hammering. "And me?" he asked. "What do I do?" She looked at him finally, eyes steady, full of quiet authority. "You remember. You do the work. You carry it with you, so it doesn't bury anyone else." The silence stretched, filled with the dripping of rain from the roof, the soft hum of wind through the trees, the faint rustle of leaves. He watched her rise, broom in hand again, calm and deliberate. Each movement seemed measured to leave a mark not on the ground but on the air, on the memory, on the responsibility he now carried. "I can't stay," she said, echoing the weight of finality in her tone. "You don't need to." "Just remember," he whispered, voice barely audible, knowing the truth of her words would follow him long after she left. Her steps carried her closer to the well, each footfall deliberate, leaving faint depressions in the damp soil. She paused once, looking back over her shoulder, calm and resolute. "You see me?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he replied, voice low but certain. "Then do the work," she said. Her hand brushed the loose dirt, brushing faint soil over what remained unspoken, unacknowledged, but never forgotten. The morning light pressed against the storm clouds, pale and soft, illuminating the wet ground, the ash-streaked floor of the house, and the quiet lines she had swept into nothingness. He watched her lift her broom and step onto the loose dirt, the weight of her presence, her purpose, settling in the spaces she left behind. She moved with deliberate patience, unwavering, leaving him with the knowledge that the storm had passed, but the work, the memory, the truth, the reckoning would continue with him. The rancher stood alone then, chest tight, watching the filled-in well, feeling the wind press lightly against the house, brushing damp strands of hair from his forehead. Silence no longer felt heavy. It carried the weight of responsibility, of acknowledgement, of memory reclaimed. He turned slowly toward the house, boots pressing wet wood, eyes catching faint lines she had traced, now gone, leaving nothing but clean floor and quiet space. The morning had settled fully, pale light spilling over the soaked yard, brushing the edges of the house, illuminating the traces of ash and dust she had left behind. He stood in the center of the kitchen, hands on the broom now, hesitant at first, feeling its weight, its rhythm, its purpose. The house was quiet, filled with memory and the faint scent of rain, but the presence of what she had done lingered, patient and absolute. She was gone, vanished not with violence, but with the certainty of work completed. He swept slowly at first, tracing lines carefully, deliberate, letting the broom carry remnants of the storm, remnants of confessions, remnants of buried truths into the corners. Dust rose in faint spirals, then fell again, leaving the floor cleaner with each pass. He moved with purpose now, chest tight, steadying with every stroke. Old letters lay on the table, edges yellowed, unopened for years. He picked them up one by one, opening envelopes, reading names, dates, fragments of lives paused, stories left untold, responsibility ignored. Each word carried weight, but he felt the presence of her instructions guiding him, shaping the work he now had to do. The wind whispered outside, light now, brushing the eaves, pressing through cracks in the boards. He fixed the back door properly, tightening the latch, securing the house against storms to come. He glanced toward the filled-in well outside, earth packed solid, yet memory and truth pressing gently beneath the surface. He knew what had been there, what she had reminded him of, and he felt the responsibility settle deep in his chest. She had come, done her work, and left him to continue, to carry the memory, to tend the land with awareness. Footsteps sounded faintly on the wooden floor behind him, but when he turned, no one was there. The house was empty, save for him, the broom in his hands, and the clean floor stretching across the rooms. He moved through the house systematically, checking each corner, lifting rugs, dusting window sills, tending to small repairs neglected in years of solitude. Each movement echoed with care, patience, and remembrance. The storm had passed, but the work, the acknowledgement, the tending, the reckoning, continued. He paused by the table, setting down the broom, eyes catching the light spilling across the floor. Old letters spread before him, some unopened still, some read and marked with careful attention. He realized the significance, the house, the land, the storm, the woman, they had all brought him here, to this point where he could no longer ignore what had been buried. He opened the windows slightly, letting in the pale morning air, cool and clean, stirring dust motes into the sunlight. The house seemed to breathe, small drafts carrying faint scents of wet earth and memory, of ash and rain, of presence now vanished but felt deeply. Outside, the yard was awash of mud and water, flattened grass and broken branches, remnants of the storm. He stepped onto the porch, boots pressing wet wood, eyes sweeping the landscape, seeing fences in need of repair, gates warped by wind, fields churned by rain. The work was tangible, immediate, necessary. He reached for tools left neglected, lifting, fixing, straightening, tending. Each action carried weight, a recognition of responsibility that extended beyond himself, beyond the storm, beyond memory. The door stood open behind him, unbarred, inviting, unguarded. He glanced back once, chest rising and falling, eyes catching the pale morning light. She would come again, he realized, if the work demanded it, if memory called. But for now, he was alone, tasked with care, tending, remembering. Each sweep of the broom, each repair, each letter read and filed, became a ritual, a promise to maintain, to honor, to continue. He paused by the window, watching the light press across the yard, trees dripping, birds cautiously returning. "You see me," he whispered, almost to himself, imagining her presence, feeling her guidance. "Yeah," came the echo of memory, internal, certain. "Then do the work," he said aloud, steady, deliberate, voice carrying across empty rooms. He returned to the floor, broom in hand, sweeping lines across wood now clean, deliberate, ritualistic, ensuring nothing remained buried, nothing forgotten. The house was quiet, the storm gone, but the presence of the work, the memory, the reckoning, remained. He moved through each room with care, hands steady, eyes attentive, mind focused. Outside, the land waited, fields and fences and the filled-in well, all silent witnesses. Inside, the house breathed, clean, maintained, alive with attention and purpose. He swept until his arms ached, until the lines were clear, until the weight of absence became presence in its place. He paused finally, setting down the broom, chest rising and falling. Letters opened, fences mended, windows clear, floor clean. The house no longer felt empty, it felt steady, attentive, awake. Memory had been honored, truth acknowledged, responsibility accepted. He opened the door wide, letting morning press fully inside. Storms would come again, but he was ready. The land, the house, the memories, all were tended, alive, no longer silent. The rancher stood alone then, chest tight, watching the filled-in well, feeling the wind press lightly against the house, brushing damp strands of hair from his forehead. Silence no longer felt heavy. It carried the weight of responsibility, of acknowledgement, of memory reclaimed. He turned slowly toward the house, boots pressing wet wood, eyes catching faint lines she had traced, now gone, leaving nothing but clean floor and quiet space. The morning had settled fully, pale light spilling over the soaked yard, brushing the edges of the house, illuminating the traces of ash and dust she had left behind. He stood in the center of the kitchen, hands on the broom now, hesitant at first, feeling its weight, its rhythm, its purpose. The house was quiet, filled with memory and the faint scent of rain, but the presence of what she had done lingered, patient and absolute. She was gone, vanished not with violence, but with the certainty of work completed. He swept slowly at first, tracing lines carefully, deliberate, letting the broom carry remnants of the storm, remnants of confessions, remnants of buried truths into the corners. Dust rose in faint spirals, then fell again, leaving the floor cleaner with each pass. He moved with purpose now, chest tight, steadying with every stroke. Old letters lay on the table, edges yellowed, unopened for years. He picked them up one by one, opening envelopes, reading names, dates, fragments of lives paused, stories left untold, responsibility ignored. Each word carried weight, but he felt the presence of her instructions guiding him, shaping the work he now had to do. The wind whispered outside, light now, brushing the eaves, pressing through cracks in the boards. He fixed the back door properly, tightening the latch, securing the house against storms to come. He glanced toward the filled-in well outside, earth packed solid, yet memory and truth pressing gently beneath the surface. He knew what had been there, what she had reminded him of, and he felt the responsibility settle deep in his chest. She had come, done her work, and left him to continue, to carry the memory, to tend the land with awareness. Footsteps sounded faintly on the wooden floor behind him, but when he turned, no one was there. The house was empty, save for him, the broom in his hands, and the clean floor stretching across the rooms. He moved through the house systematically, checking each corner, lifting rugs, dusting window sills, tending to small repairs neglected in years of solitude. Each movement echoed with care, patience, and remembrance. The storm had passed, but the work, the acknowledgement, the tending, the reckoning, continued. He paused by the table, setting down the broom, eyes catching the light spilling across the floor. Old letters spread before him, some unopened still, some read and marked with careful attention. He realized the significance, the house, the land, the storm, the woman, they had all brought him here, to this point where he could no longer ignore what had been buried. He opened the windows slightly, letting in the pale morning air, cool and clean, stirring dust motes into the sunlight. The house seemed to breathe, small drafts carrying faint scents of wet earth and memory, of ash and rain, of presence now vanished but felt deeply. Outside, the yard was awash of mud and water, flattened grass and broken branches, remnants of the storm. He stepped onto the porch, boots pressing wet wood, eyes sweeping the landscape, seeing fences in need of repair, gates warped by wind, fields churned by rain. The work was tangible, immediate, necessary. He reached for tools left neglected, lifting, fixing, straightening, tending. Each action carried weight, a recognition of responsibility that extended beyond himself, beyond the storm, beyond memory. The door stood open behind him, unbarred, inviting, unguarded. He glanced back once, chest rising and falling, eyes catching the pale morning light. She would come again, he realized, if the work demanded it, if memory called. But for now, he was alone, tasked with care, tending, remembering. Each sweep of the broom, each repair, each letter read and filed, became a ritual, a promise to maintain, to honor, to continue. He paused by the window, watching the light press across the yard, trees dripping, birds cautiously returning. "You see me," he whispered, almost to himself, imagining her presence, feeling her guidance. "Yeah," came the echo of memory, internal, certain. "Then do the work," he said aloud, steady, deliberate, voice carrying across empty rooms. He returned to the floor, broom in hand, sweeping lines across wood now clean, deliberate, ritualistic, ensuring nothing remained buried, nothing forgotten. The house was quiet, the storm gone, but the presence of the work, the memory, the reckoning, remained. He moved through each room with care, hands steady, eyes attentive, mind focused. Outside, the land waited, fields and fences and the filled-in well, all silent witnesses. Inside, the house breathed, clean, maintained, alive with attention and purpose. He swept until his arms ached, until the lines were clear, until the weight of absence became presence in its place. He paused finally, setting down the broom, chest rising and falling. Letters opened, fences mended, windows clear, floor clean. The house no longer felt empty, it felt steady, attentive, awake. Memory had been honored, truth acknowledged, responsibility accepted. He opened the door wide, letting morning press fully inside. Storms would come again, but he was ready. The land, the house, the memories, all were tended, alive, no longer silent.